So with that, I will now do my quick introduction of Mr. Aaron Norris. Aaron is currently, and has been for a few years now, the Vice President of Market Insights. And I'll let him go into an explanation as to what the heck that just means. Aaron, if you don't know, has been around in this region with his father, Bruce Norris, for many years, leaders in the real estate industry, leaders in the thought process, in the technology, in the hard money lending, in the flipping, in the development. They have been around a long time. They are community leaders. They have raised, Aaron, are you yet over $1 million for the Make-A-Wish?
Over $1 million with I Survive Real Estate. And thank you, IVAR, for supporting that all these years.
Absolutely. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Aaron Norris. And in the process, if anybody has questions for Aaron, please go into the chat function, type your question in, and we'll do our best with Aaron to address that. Aaron, you're up.
So good to see everybody. Sorry it's not in person, but it's really good to be here. VP of Market Insights, I basically have access to billions of public records, and it is my job to work with the media, help them write better stories that is data-driven. I was running a podcast until my little cancer incident last year, and we just haven't started it back up. So I do a lot of writing and a lot of teaching nationwide, investors, realtors, and mortgage professionals how to get more dangerous with their marketing. And I'm just really passionate about small business and helping us compete against Wall Street that is making it more difficult to be in the business. So today's going to be a little bit nerdy. I'm going to ask you to put a little bit of your investor hat on, sort of. I think some of the strategies I'm going to talk about are just going to be really important moving forward because of some of the competition that we're facing. Per usual, I have way too many slides. Can you see the slides okay? Yeah, okay, great. All right, first, local marketing. Big businesses are really starting to crush small businesses. They're driving up our costs and decreasing margins. For those of you who advertise on things like Google pay-per-click, you know how expensive it's getting for our keywords in our industry at large, and digital marketing overall is really up. And we've got these Wall Street players that are just spending a fortune on direct mail, digital ads. They've been on TV, billboards, you name it. They're really spending a lot of money, and a lot of small businesses just aren't going to be able to compete. And it drives me nuts because these big players don't necessarily live, hire, play, give, invest local. That's what we do as small businesses, and the role that we play in the community is so important. They're transaction focused, we're people focused, and it's part of why I like talking about this stuff is how do we win as small businesses? And we really do have to focus on things that don't scale. And this is like a great matrix to explain what that means. So in the orange, you see big business. So if I'm focusing on marketing like radio ads or TV ads, billboards, every door direct mail, that's outbound marketing, low targeting. It's just very expensive, and it's not for the average small business something that we can do. We know that there's low targeting and inbound, so we're trying to get people to come into us with our website, with a YouTube channel and Twitter and other social media sites. There's so much of that created every second of the day. It's just really hard to stand out. Thinking about starting a podcast this year, good luck. It's not easy. Now, the good stuff, the inbound and high targeted stuff like the Zillow Premier Agent or paid ads can be really good. The problem is that you've got a company sitting between you and your customer. And it's really hard to know what things are going to cost because digital prices for advertising are constantly going up. But in the top right, you've got this idea of the right audience, right message, right channel at the right time. There's a way to be able to contact the exact people that you're looking to connect with using data, and it's a lot of fun. Why I want to target off market with you is because every listing starts as off market, right? Whether it comes from a relationship, a referral, or if it's marketing that you're doing, it all starts off market. It's your job to bring it on market on the MLS and give it its fair chance on the market. I'm expecting this year to be a seller's market. Even with increases in the interest rates, I don't think we're going to have as crazy a year as last year, but I think we could have a very different experience here in the Inland Empire compared to along, Los Angeles and Orange County. Every time one of these variants come through, I'm like rejoicing because where I invest, I know that it's going to get stickier. People in LA are going to move out here because they can finally afford home ownership and not have to live in dangerous areas. To be quite frank, they can have space and they can have good schools and access to the amenities. A funny story, I actually stopped a major news outlet from doing a hit piece on Riverside. She called, and the concept was that LA is getting so unaffordable. People who can't afford it are moving to crappy cities like Riverside. I'm like, when's the last time you were in Riverside? Did you know they spent $2 billion during the downturn via the Riverside Renaissance? I'm like, if you haven't visited in over a decade, you better not write the story till you do. She didn't end up writing the story. I think we have a lot going for us. Low inventory is going to remain. We've got lifetime low interest rates. We've got FHA, all the loan limits are increased. So I expect prices to go with it. So it's going to, I don't see any reason why we're not going to have a great year. Another reason that it might be interesting, an interesting year is because Zillow exiting the market. Riverside was number 4, but you can see 5 Inland Empire cities made the top 10 in California when it came to iBuyers, and green on this chart is Zillow. So they're winding it down. They have to close properties that they've already committed to buying. But with that gone, you can see really Redfin and Opendoor are the only 2 competing heavily in this market. OfferPad disappeared a few years ago. They may come back now that they're public, but maybe they'll be less aggressive now that one of the major competitors have exited the market. We'll see. I was actually the one that also, it drives me nuts. I hate the way that media covers iBuyers. I think they're doing a huge disservice to the real estate industry. Don't fall for this. They keep on trying to say, oh, iBuyers are only 2% of the market. Well, they're not in every market. So it's completely disingenuous. So in markets like Phoenix or the Inland Empire, where they're hot and heavy, they're becoming a larger percentage. And not only that, they're in a very specific buy bucket, which is the first time buyer stuff. And it drives me nuts. So they're taking up inventory, taking it off the market, and sometimes it never returns. And this is the story that I pitched last May to Bloomberg, and they finally picked it up, is that they were shoving inventory into these institutional rental landlords that were permanently taking this off the market in bulk. So all of this was happening off market. So that's part of the reason why I need you to get more dangerous on off market, is to compete with these guys. Just a reminder, iBuyers, if you're not aware, they're not really after the buy sell side of the business necessarily. They want every piece of the transaction. So they are creating ecosystems, closing platforms, loans, insurance is coming, you name it. They just want a piece of everything, not just the buy sell side. For Riverside also, what they've done, and it has changed a little bit, they don't want people problems and they don't want property problems. So their standard buy box on average of what they're doing all of last year, I think there was over 600. It's around 1,800 square feet, 3.2, they will do 4.2, but it's 1985 and newer. They're not going after older stuff. And it's typically $600,000 or under. So they're really in that first time buyer category. So if you've got a buyer that's going to throw it around like an iBuyer is going to probably buy their stuff and give you a hard time, no, they're not. This is what they're after. And if there's any divorce, anything going on with people, fat chance. If it's an ugly property, these iBuyers, for the most part, Redfin will do more of a rehab. Opendoor, they don't like doing rehabs that often. It's rare to see they even do carpet these days. They just do a cleaning. So the first off market strategy I want to talk to you about is distressed. I get a lot of questions about this, but maybe I should start ramping up to do foreclosures. This is a chart of auction notices and pre-foreclosure notices. Does it look like you should be building your REO team in 2022? I'd also like to remind you, remember in 2008, some of the programs they came out with where prices have been cut in half out here, and somehow they managed to find a way to get people to stay in their home by a variety of things, extending the term of the mortgage, lowering the rate, silent seconds, whatever. In this particular market with the pandemic driving, some of the distress, I just have a really hard time thinking any political party is going to allow a huge wave of foreclosure. I think a lot of lenders are going to be forced to really assist homeowners in particular. They don't want anybody to leave, and tenants. Look at how much money they threw at the problem. If you know a landlord, you are a landlord that still have tenants struggling, 211 here in Riverside still has money that they're writing. They are willing to make up rents all the way through March of 2020. So I have landlords that are getting tens of thousands of dollars making up for rents. I know some of them don't want it because they'd like the tenants to leave to raise prices, but that's another story. The distressed opportunity is really going to be keeping an eye on people that are facing distress, but not how we're thinking about it. I would actually look for things like HOA liens and mechanics liens, something that may be a little bit more off the radar. So for an example, right now in Riverside, there's only 154 people in the foreclosure process. It doesn't mean any of those are going to go through. Chances are a fair majority of those are going to get canceled, sold, whatever. But there are 395 active HOA liens. So more than double the opportunity. And I think something that a lot of people aren't focusing on at all. So you can target those. What's interesting about consumers is sometimes they'll pay their loan, but they won't pay the HOA thinking that they're not going to foreclose. That's not true, by the way. Instead, maybe it's time to focus a little bit more on death, disease, divorce, denial, and drugs. I mean, these are the 5 Ds always happening in life. There's always people always need to move for different reasons, and here are 5 of them. Using public records and data to get in front of them. Some of it can be a little bit glib, but you know, it's what we need to do. As an example, a death of joint tenant in Q4 alone, there's 223 people. Those could be opportunities. I mean, you don't need to send a card saying, "Oh, sorry, your spouse died." Yeah, please don't be creepy. But it's like, "Hey, looking to sell, need help with probate, need to help downsizing." It's, you know, it's an opportunity. So think outside the box a little bit. Don't hit the same list, that pre-foreclosure list everybody loves. It's a great list, but you know it's going to get beat up a lot. So there are other ways to tackle that data. Absentee owners is another one. I was a little bit surprised when I pulled the data for Riverside. Here's in Riverside, there's about 95,000 SFR and condos in the market. 15,000 are owned by absentee. And I was just trying to just look at the data in different ways. Owned before 2013, trying to make sure they have a lot of equity, and over a 10,000 square foot lot. I'll go after why I pulled this specific data in a little bit. There's over 3,000. So lots of opportunity. But when I look into that 3,000 list, the average age of the landlord is 65. So they're getting up in age. The turnover, they typically hold these properties for over 20 years. So I would probably refine the data even more to say, hey, let's only talk to aging landlords that have owned for a minimum of 20 years when they've gotten very close to using all those tax benefits of depreciation. Other niches and data that you might stack there, maybe you really go after the tax advantage, only looking for properties where they've owned for over 25 years, since, you know, 27 and a half, that's the depreciation schedule, or where they've owned 100% equity, maybe doing something a little bit creative for those buyers that don't have a lot of money down, but who are willing to, you know, maybe a landlord will do some creative financing and carry the paper for somebody that they believe in. Multiple owners or corporations, out-of-state investors. That's one of my favorite. I think it's really dangerous to be an out-of-state investor in California these days. Too much going on. And what's fun, technology has just changed the name of our game so much. You can be in front of a property and right there, just call the person, just say, "Hey, I'm in front of your property and you've got a green lawn and a boarded up door. What's going on?" Or sending a letter out of state to an absentee owner saying, "Hey, you know, Riverside's getting really aggressive on brown lawns. Here's a picture. You may not know that your tenant's not taking care of it. I've included the number of my favorite landscape guy. Hey, and whenever you think of selling, even if you've got a tenant in place, give me a call." There's so many different ways to leverage the data these days. I've got people that only do phone calls. They give really good phone. They don't do direct mail. They don't do digital ads. I think that's another reason why I love this business. You can be uniquely you, whatever communication style you are, just own it. You don't have to be something you're not. I do want to cover why housing is so difficult in California, because I think as agents, we are going to really step into a very pivotal role in the next decade, especially in California. It's just so messy. I mean, you've got a governor who ran thinking he was going to create 3 million units. We've got a Democrat supermajority. We already know the majority of renters are spending more than 30% of their income, and we have a growing homeless problem. But the problem is that we've got super high land costs. There's lots of risk of land development. We've got skilled labor shortage. We have government incentives versus union requirements that always don't mix. We've got high cost of government regulation. And of course, California spends a ton on unaffordable housing. And I've got a great example of that. But the cost of building, the National Association of Home Builders just came out, and on average of a 400 $100,000 new build, it costs almost $100,000 in government related fees and impact fees to get that process through. So you wonder why you can't build anything affordable in California. By the time you're dealing with fees and the land alone, you're already over 200 grand. So how can you build something affordable and get somebody in there when the numbers just don't make sense? We've got environmental laws, activists, NIMBYism is loud and strong. And unfortunately, especially right now, if you have not been building this, it is a wild ride. We have supply chain issues where you're having to order appliances a year in advance. And also, I think this year is going to be increasing wages. So construction is going to get more costly and difficult. Here's the thing, though. We just redid our regional housing needs allocation statewide. For the county of Riverside, by 2029, we are supposed to build an additional 167,000 affordable housing units. Riverside are just an example. We've got to build around 18.5. If you've never seen these numbers before, didn't know they exist, this is sort of the breakdown of what that looks like. The median area income for Riverside County is 77,500. And this is a matrix depending on how many people are in your household. But to give an idea of what will work for these different categories, it's pretty interesting. But what happens if we don't comply? What if we don't hit those numbers? Well, the state is coming back and wants it so bad. They're saying, okay, we're finally going to put teeth to this. If you do not meet these goals, you could lose money for transportation projects, CBDG funds. If you work in or volunteer in any of the nonprofits out here, you know how reliant we are on those funds. And the worst case scenario is the state just takes over your planning department and does it for you because you can't get it done. They haven't ever done that yet in the state of California, but it's possible. That being said, I do want to talk about value add because it's not just for investors. I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but my favorite is working with millennials. I can spot them right away. They're more interested in talking about ownership of a rental and not living in their own property. It kills me. More oftentimes than not with millennials, that's a conversation I'm having, and I'm begging them, will you please consider at least a duplex, a fourplex? Let's get to investing, and maybe you can accomplish both. But I really believe in the concept of you should own one before you get into rentals. You end up learning a lot. But there are a lot of interesting opportunities. Accessory dwelling units are not new, but maybe COVID has really changed our mind on how these can be used. These are not just for, generating income in the back. It could be for doing a lot of different things. So these are secondary units that are in the backyard, attached to garage, actually a converted garage above, you name it. It doesn't matter what they look like, but for the sake of code, it's a single family home with an ADU. It's not separate or considered a duplex, and you can't sell it separately. So, in-law suite, home business, extra income, home education, downsizing, like a senior moving in the smaller unit in the back and renting the front for income. If they're sitting on a low basis, like why move? If they really like the property and where they're located, maybe just sort of think outside of the box a little bit and use a realtor. There's different ways that you can make money. Maybe you can get into property management for them and help them out. Of course, residential and commercial investors are doing this a lot, but the data is showing that homeowners are really taking the lead on this. So if you're having conversation with homeowners that don't necessarily think they're going to be able to squeeze by, or they're just looking for other opportunities, adding square footage to the house or an ADU might really be something they might want to look at. The biggest things that I hear from the community is the NIMBYism fears. It changes the character and the property values. I would argue that honestly, when investors are touching these, in my experience thus far, what they're doing is they're upgrading both the primary residence and the ADU at the same time. It increases values in the area, taxes, it creates jobs, and it's going to help us meet our RENA numbers. The other one is tenants ruin neighborhoods. That's my favorite. When it comes to ADU, would you spend 150 grand building an ADU to put in a terrible tenant where you're not going to get your rent and then piss off all your neighbors? I'm sorry, I'm just not buying it. As a landlord, it's just too expensive to do to create a terrible investment. So I just don't think it's not real. What they look like, if you haven't seen a lot of these, they can be these backyard structures, cost anywhere from 80 to 250 grand, depending on what you build. Remember, state law, you can go up to 1,200 square feet. That's a decent 2-3 bedroom. It's pretty crazy. I think we're going to see a lot more modular, flat packed, and 3D printed homes in the next 5 years. Rancho Mirage is getting the very first 3D printed community built by Mighty Buildings, which is based in Northern California. So that'll be really interesting to watch if it really does, and in fact, lower costs and how quickly they go up. I am very interested, but the idea of more modular factory built homes and then getting it shipped on and built on site is very interesting to me. I build in Florida, build to rent, and it's not unusual to have things disappear because the supply chain is so messed up. So you really have to protect whatever comes on site. And I think some of these manufactured built homes are going to come in handy. JADUs are converted garages. They can be a lot less to build out because the structure is already there. They can share bathrooms, but they need a separate entrance and an efficiency kitchen. And there are no parking requirements. Luckily, in the Inland Empire, we don't have the same problems that they do in LA with parking. And keep in mind, manufactured homes, they work as well. Manufactured homes are less expensive, but they doesn't mean that they're less in quality or beauty. Some of these manufactured homes these days look absolutely stunning. This is actually one that I toured in San Diego by Crest Backyard Homes. There's a 400 square foot, 1 bedroom, and it was stunning. It was so well designed. I felt like I was in an HGV show, not in a Momo home. IKEA even got in on the action. Now, tiny homes is really going to be regulated by the city that you're in. The state set the standards, but the cities can be more flexible. So I was on Riverside's Housing Commission, and they were debating whether or not to include tiny homes as part of their mix. And I'm like, why not? You've got back porch homes right in your own backyard building these things. Why not allow that? If you need affordable housing, it can count, and it can count towards your RENA numbers as well. And the back porch homes, I think, start around 70 grand. So a lot, very affordable. Another really interesting opportunity that you might not know about is multifamily. In downtown, the properties that have the underparking, those are considered very unsafe for earthquake purposes. And so you've got some investment companies coming through and actually turning those under parkings into units. But here's some other ideas, at least one and up to 25% of your current units. So I just put the matrix there of how many you can build depending on how many units are there. So if you are in commercial or multifamily and you're working with buyers, they might not know that this is available, that they could actually end up adding units to the property and increasing rents. Really cool. ADUs are never a spray and pray approach. Definitely do your homework. I created the word cramlord. I'm telling investors, don't ruin it for everybody by doing terrible design and ruining the neighborhood. These ADUs, and we're about to talk about SB9 in a second. ADUs that are well designed should feel like their own separate unit, I believe, for the best tenant experience and the most rents. So if you're on a corner lot and maybe you can have the ADU exit in its own driveway and own garage to where, for all intents and purposes, they're a completely separate entity, that's great. Appraisals are starting to catch up a little bit. More financing is becoming available, but don't expect there not to be challenges there. Oh gosh, you still have neighbors that complain. That's always going to be an issue. And then lead times. Building is just taking more time and more costly than most people expect. Design, go with a local pro that has experience working with the city. It's always dangerous hiring somebody from outside that hasn't built one of these or worked with the jurisdiction that they're building in. And always follow the good neighbor policy. Nobody wants to live next door to a piece of junk. And the process is pretty spelled out. At this point, you should go to whatever city that you're wanting to work with and ask for ADU ordinances. Typically, they will have them. If they don't, it reverts to the state, and the state is extremely flexible. You'll be very happy if it reverts to the state. Is it working? What's interesting is that a lot of homeowners have started to do these. This is a report that Turner put out. It's concentrated in high value areas and in lower income, lower rent areas, but the amount of permits and completions are pretty impressive so far. And this is in 2018 and 2019. I expect 2020 and 2021 just to be bonkers. But to compare that with an embarrassment for the city of LA, LA completed 8,600 ADUs, and in 2021, as of October, the $1.2 billion fund that they created back in 2016 had only released 1,000 units, and the average cost is over $579,000. Super affordable. So SB9 went into effect January 1st of this year. And oh boy, Mark told me that there are some cities banding together to try to outlaw this. The problem is that I don't know about you, but I am very uncomfortable with the current state of real estate. I don't, I love owning rentals, but it's very uncomfortable to watch what's happened with rents and how far they've gone up so quickly. Prices in the empire. How are you as a millennial or a Gen Z expected to get into this market? It's just really unrealistic. And the haves versus the have-nots have started to make me feel like we're going to see some very rough regulation. And I don't suspect that this group of cities is going to win. Pretty much. We need units. We need affordable housing units. We took a decade off of building. So this is one of the state's reactions to that. And right now it's only built for owner occupants. So it's where you're able to, it doesn't do away with single family zoning. It just makes it more flexible to where if you're a homeowner, you can either split the lot or build a duplex. Long story short, that's all it is. It has to be within an urban cluster. They define that in the bill, but the city of Riverside, we qualify. You cannot, if it's a deed restricted, rent controlled house where it's been occupied for a tenant, occupied by a tenant within 3 years, won't work. No more than 25% of an exterior wall can be torn down unless the city approves. So they don't want a whole bunch of investors coming in and tearing stuff down and rebuilding. Right now, very built for owner occupants. Must allow for 800 square feet, 4-foot setbacks, pretty standard, half mile of parking if you're within a quality. You don't have to replace parking if you're within a half mile of quality mass transit, which most of Riverside is. If not, parking really isn't an issue here. I'm going to go a little bit fast through this. I won't go through that. One of the things that I'm hearing incorrectly, remember that the state sets the rules, but the city can refine it to be more flexible. Right now, the state law does not require the cities to allow for ADUs as well. So say you've got a half acre lot that you want to split to quarter acres, and you're thinking you're going to be able to build a second house and then also build ADUs for both properties. No, that's not the intent of the law. Right now, that is not the case. Could the city change their mind and allow that? Yes. Could they create a variance for you? Absolutely. And as of right now, the state has said no rentals for less than 30 days. So sorry, vacation room rentals are out. The properties, if you're going to do a lot split, need to be roughly 60-40 split. So there's no weird whatever. The minimum square footage for the lot is 1,200 square feet. I don't know if I've seen a lot in Riverside that's 1,200 square feet. It's really small. And if you're in any kind of zone, just expect that you're not going to be able to, it's not going to fall under these guidelines. So any kind of flood, earthquake, fire zone, endangered species, historic, or conservation, it's not going to work. Also, previously subdivided an adjacent parcel using an urban lot split is not allowed. So if you've got a homeowner thinking they're going to bounce, next door, it's not possible right now. It's a very interesting rule, but anyway, can't build it next door. Let's see, what is this one? Owner occupancy, a minimum of 3 years if you decide to do this. And final thoughts. I think early adopters might get burned. It was the case with ADUs, but I think we're going to learn that investors are going to be needed to do some of these. These would be perfect for flip opportunities, investors who are into value creation. The thing I don't like about it, unlike the ADU laws, if for submitted complete application, the city has only 60 days to approve your permit. With this rule, there are no rules like that. There's no timelines. So I have investors that have said, in the city of LA, it's taken a year for a lot split. It's just terrible. So I don't love SB9. It's trying. But for you as a realtor who are working with investors, or you're working with homeowners, maybe looking for some more creative options or looking to create some extra income, you never know. There could be some really cool opportunities there. Just for fun, I pulled up single family home sites that were 1 story, where the primary house was 2,500 square feet and under, and where the lots were, a half acre, just trying to get an idea of how many opportunities were available. I was surprised, almost 6,000. So if you're I don't know if you've got somebody coming in from Orange County with money in their pocket to burn. I've heard stories of people from the San Francisco area getting to work remotely, and the median price up there is what, 1.8 million? They come down here and they're just laughing because they're like, wow, this is nothing, even if they're going to markets like Palm Springs. And this could be some other ways to generate income if they can't be here the entire time. Another sort of loosely related concept is upzoning. So did you know that the entirety of downtown Riverside is an opportunity zone? I did not know that until I wrote a chapter for our investors on opportunity zones when they first came out. But I met with the city of Riverside and they just weren't really all that excited about opportunity zones. But one of the most unique features of, in a 1031 exchange, it has to be like kind. You're going from physical real estate to physical real estate assets. With opportunity zones, it's the only vehicle that I know of where you can go from any kind of capital gains. It doesn't matter if it comes from cryptocurrency, stocks, appreciated stocks, whatever it is. It's not that hard. It's a 2-page IRS form. You have to create an opportunity fund, which is a 2-page form. You have to fund the account, create the entity, and then you have to invest in an opportunity zone. So if you were to build a house in downtown Riverside, that would count. And you have quite a bit of time. It's a lot more flexible. You have a lot more time than a 1031 exchange, which are getting very hard to complete these days. But in downtown Riverside, which is an opportunity zone, just for fun, I pulled up our 3 lots, so lots that are zoned for triplexes, where there was a single family house on site and nothing more. There was almost 900 of those. That means, according to state and local law, that I can build 2 more units. And because of state laws around ADUs, I can build an additional 3. So I can turn a lot into basically a 6-unit house that currently only has 1 single family house on it right now. Pretty cool. So I don't know, maybe you've got a cryptocurrency investor who has made $1 billion and wants to get into real estate. Now is your time. There's an opportunity there, something different. But it is important to know as a realtor, if you're having people, 1031 exchange investors that are having a hard time and really fearful, have them look at opportunity zones. As long as they have a long time horizon, it might be worth their time. It's a little different strategy, but it's there. I think these kind of SB9 and opportunity zones, millennials obsessed with rentals, we covered that. Seniors looking to age in place, needing extra income. Families who may be looking for extra income to pay their mortgages. Remote workers seeking extra space, upzoning, opportunity zones, lots of different opportunities around these specific bills, which is really cool. I'm going to touch on SB 10 just slightly, because this is really going to be dictated by the local jurisdiction. So the city of Riverside, Corona, Moreno Valley, they're going to have to designate these areas. But in short, you're going to be able to construct 10 units with an additional 2 ADUs and 2 JADUs. So 14 total units in designated areas. So an investor isn't going to be able to drop into the wood streets and randomly build a 14-unit house. So please squash that. If you hear that on the streets, that's not it. The city is going to come back and say, this is where we want density. This is where it's best designed and best suited. They're going to tell us where this is for. And to my knowledge, a lot of cities have not come up with those areas just yet, but it's up to 14 units. Is really interesting. I work with the city on their arts district, or I forget what they called it. It runs down University, is downtown. So I know pretty much for a fact that they're going to really focus on that university, sort of from UCR to downtown. That's going to be an obvious spot for them. But I think for realtors, 2022, please use demographics in your marketing. I think it's a really interesting way to target individuals most likely to sell. As we age, we tend to become net sellers of real estate. So over 65, they're usually looking to not have to be a landlord, deal with tenants. They want smaller things. So just by adding, hey, I only want to market to 65 and over, a little bit more every year on top of your regular farming, you can have increased success. What's really fun, the data available these days, one of the things is interests. And it makes me laugh because one of the examples I use is animals. Imagine how many cat postcards you can send female owners over the age of 65. What are the chances that's going to land on their fridge or in their drawer for a long time? It is not unusual, that a message that speaks to somebody can end up in a drawer if they resonate with it. So messaging can be updated when you do a better job pulling lists and target your marketing a little bit better. Value add is going to be huge here on out. Whether you're working with investors or owners looking to create some extra income, you just need to know that it's there. And I just encourage all of you to own a niche, whether it's by age, location, owner, the kind of owner, whether it's landlord or owner occupant, distressed properties, historic homes, I don't know. Please create a niche. It is far easier to get your marketing right. And those who are just beginning too. It's far easier to own a niche, back into something and get really good at it than, unfortunately, I see far too many people say, I serve all of the Inland Empire. Do you? Probably not well. I'm not lying. Be very aware of construction right now. Our construction timelines have doubled, and it is not unusual to have surprise price increases, which is unfortunate, but is the reality of the game. And especially when you're working with homeowners, you need to prepare them for that journey. It's a little uncomfortable if you don't know what's coming, and it's a bummer. So just let people know that you're working with to expect more time and more cost, unfortunately. I would like to see our industry get more involved, and not just at IVAR, but I would like to see you on boards and commissions and volunteering for the city. I was the only small business on the commission for the housing, and I was glad to be there. It was certainly a different voice, but we need real estate advocates and to really help them understand the plight of buyers and sellers and to bring them real stories, because unfortunately the only stories they hear are the squeaky wheels. So when you're not at the table, you're on the table. So let's be at the table a little bit more. Yeah. I think that's about it. I can take your questions.
So real quickly, Aaron, I want to make a quick comment. I'm in the process right now of building an ADU at my house here in the city of Riverside.
Uh-huh.
Permit, and within the next 30 days, they will be breaking ground. I will caution everybody, and you already said this, which is the difficulty on the labor side. Mm-hmm. Most ADUs are 500 to 750 square feet, and it's a competitive market, and those are small jobs. So if you're a drywaller and you have an opportunity to get a drywalling job that for a 2,500 square foot house or a 600 foot ADU, guess what? The 600 foot ADU is not exactly that attractive. So you're having to compete right now to build ADUs on the labor side, and it's tight, very, very tight. On your issue of getting involved, I appreciate that comment, and more so now than ever. And maybe we could talk just for a second about this, because right now we've seen the state, for really the first time in my lifetime, in our lifetime, get more involved in local land use issues from a legislative standpoint. Historically, land use was always controlled and by the locals, okay? Zoning, density issues, design review, whatever it was. But we've seen the state have to fill that void relative to a lot of communities, because communities have been so lax and or oblivious to their housing needs. The state's jumped in with various laws. That doesn't mean you can't get involved at the local level, more so than ever. I've been a planning commissioner for the county of San Bernardino. I know you and I served on the city of Riverside's housing task force for the housing element update. Talk a little bit about some of your experiences and why that's important to be involved at the local level.
Yeah, they don't necessarily think outside of the box. So in one of the meetings, we were talking about the Grove project, it's an amazing story. 4 units at the Grove Church. Guys, we have 18,000 that we have to build. And I was frustrated because I know investor is a dirty word, but I'm like, listen, right now you could be marketing to investors, but here's the tick. We have a really weak media market. Press Enterprise is struggling. And a lot of investors live outside of the area, outside of the county of Riverside, so they are not plugged into local politics. However, when's the last time they've ever gotten a piece of mail from the city of Riverside saying, hey, we know you own a rental that's over 10,000 square feet. It may be really great for an accessory dwelling units. We need units built so we can comply with our RENA numbers. Please attend this workshop. They're not doing it. But that's easy. And there was over 10,000 opportunities in that bucket when I pulled the data that day. And the economic development department was like, where did you get that data? I'm all property radar. So they're just not thinking that way. And homeowners, how many homeowners are actually going to take advantage of lot splits or building a duplex? That's typically not why they buy these things. They got to be a little bit more investment minded and not mind sharing space. It's just a different mindset. So I think SB9 will eventually be opened up a little bit more to real estate investors. I'm not scared of a duplex in most neighborhoods. I was brought in to teach ADUs for the city, partly because there was a problem in the wood streets. There was some people trying to proclaim that the utilities couldn't handle the bandwidth, and that it would ruin the neighborhood. I'm like, y'all, I've been to the wood streets. Some of those wood streets are busted, and that nasty garage out back hasn't been touched in 100 years, and it could use a little bit of love. And again, are you going to spend $150,000 to get a terrible tenant and not not get the rent and then piss off all your neighbors? I just don't think most investors want to do that. So anyway, it's a different perspective. When you come with real stories and experience into these task force, it goes a long way because they're going off theory. They're going off these reports that are often, by the way, very state oriented. So that covers San Francisco and LA, which is not our local experience. So the more that we get involved and they hear your local voice, the better.
Right. If you have any questions for Aaron, please hop on the chat function and type that question in. I will say this also, Aaron. One of the challenges at the local level is there's really no political incentive to build more affordable homes. For example, one of the ways you can build more affordable homes is two ways, really, higher densities and smaller units. Both of those ideas typically do not resonate well with communities. Most communities view higher density and smaller units as a way to attract, quote, the wrong people to your community. How do we overcome this fear and get local officials to understand that that's okay? We can build higher densities, we can build smaller homes, and we can still maintain high quality standards in our communities.
Well, I think some of it we can talk about demographics. The millennials waited a long time hanging out on their parents' couch, waiting for the time to buy. And it's weird is that they're jumping into home ownership at a higher category than you would expect according to card data. They're sort of mimicking what seniors are doing. They're interested in higher dollar properties sort of right out of the gate. When we build these smaller units, you can't assume that it's going to go to a specific category of people, and it's not cheap. So if I'm building a 750 square foot ADU on a property, it's not rented for $600. It's rented for $1,500 to $2,000, which is probably going to be a professional that wants a private space, but they're saddled with $100,000 of school debt, and they're just trying to save money and find a way to live. I am really uncomfortable with the rental situation in the area. I had a rental in San Jacinto 5 years ago, rented to a family for $1,450. I didn't end up raising the rents the entire 5 years that they were there. And I was shocked when we rented. It was on the market for less than a week and rented for $23.95. $1,000 difference. San Jacinto did not get $1,000 better, nor did the house get any newer. I did put 15 grand into refreshing it, but that doesn't make sense to me. How are you spending $2,400 a month in San Jacinto for a 3-bedroom home? That's insane to me. We need more inventory. There's just a lack of inventory. Even if people want to talk about people moving out of the state, we just don't have enough. We took an entire decade off of building. They need houses. So sorry, we're going to have to, I don't think it's going to be left up to the locals, unfortunately. They're going to have to learn to play ball with the state. What I would like to see our community do is rein people in, educate, maybe have a little bit of an influence of what people build, how and where. I think that's where it's going to have to stay.
Right. Okay, 3 questions. One regarding median sales price value is going to be going up or down in the near future. What do you think?
I would say up this year. Remember, they just increased loan limits. We've got a lot of people from LA, Orange County. Listen, every wave of Omicron, it makes that remote work more the norm. So people are like, sweet, I only have to go into LA once, twice a week. I'll live in Riverside. There's people, I know people who lived in Moreno Valley who are trekking it down to downtown LA every day in carpool. So they were already doing it before, but I think we're going to see more of it now. So I expect the Inland Empire to have a decent ride. I don't think it's going to be as crazy as last year, but I don't
Right. And with the lack of inventory, the lack of supply is going to, if anything, artificially keep that number up, I think, on the sales price side.
Yeah.
Another question, County of Riverside versus the City of Riverside building an ADU. You have any experiences relative to which one might be easier?
I don't, but interesting. Rob Moran with the County of Riverside actually builds ADUs.
There you go.
Yeah, so he's investor friendly because he's an investor. So they held some ADU workshops. I would suspect they're a little bit more excited about it, but Riverside is trying.
Just real quickly, my experience with the City of Riverside, we were able to basically get plans approved and pull the permit within 100 days.
Oh, by the way, I did this weekend get to visit Habitat for Humanity is building off of Spruce, a little neighborhood of 10 units that are 450 square feet. They're going to be able to, those plans are going to be available to anybody who wants them. And they will have already been vetted by the city. So if you're building the exact same thing, you won't even have to go through that process. You'll just be able to pick up the plan to build. And these are cute. I mean, for 450 square feet, what they were able to do. And Kathy Michalek is a good friend. And I asked her, how much do you think this would cost to build retail? And she said 80 grand. I'm like, wow, it's pretty cute. So very possible, doable.
That's great. Another question from Brent Biestel. Regarding the 1031 tax exchange versus the opportunity zone, how difficult is it to explain or execute that with an investor? They may be looking at you like you're from Mars when you're trying to explain this.
You know what? Our job is just to let them know about the opportunity and to educate them. It's not. They're going to want to meet with their CPA. They need to have a longer timeline to fully benefit because you have to hold the investment for 10 years to get the full benefit of the bill. So right now, I think you can still get a 5% credit against the tax that is owed. So you get a 5% discount. And then after 10 years, it gets a full step up in basis. So there's still some interesting opportunity there. But for me, it's the timeline is a lot more flexible. And I think it seemed overly complicated, and it doesn't have to be. So.
Okay, question from Rhonda Bilton says, who does she contact to get the plans from Habitat for Humanity?
You could contact maybe the Riverside option. They're not fully built yet, so I don't know if they're available at the city, but if you call the city building department and ask them about those plans, if they're available yet, they would know. If not, just contact Habitat for Humanity and ask them. Okay, fantastic. Well, we're winding down here. I just want to thank you again, Aaron, for your time, your commitment to our community. You are a shining light in Riverside in this region, and I personally appreciate everything you do. Thank you.
And your perspectives, I think, are always spot on as well. I'm trying to think of one more thing. Yes, that's about it. We're going to wrap it up. Oh, I do want to make the announcement. Normally, this meeting is the first Wednesday of the month. Unfortunately, the March meeting, which would have been March 2nd, conflicts with CAR's virtual legislative day, which starts at the exact same time as our meeting. So we're going to have our next meeting on Tuesday, March 1st. So keep that in mind. We'll be sending emails out to everybody a week in advance as another reminder. And with that, I think we're going to be wrapping up. Again, thank you so much, Aaron. I appreciate it. Have a great week, and I hope to see you soon. Take care, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.